let's shift gears a bit to UFC. UFC 235 is coming up, and this is a really big pay-per-view. I mean,
Huge.
this has got some stuff on it. Like, I'm for real. Like, this isn't one that they're selling like, hey, take a look at this. It's a UFC. I know how much you love fighting. You're gonna watch it anyway. No, this is good. This is good stuff. I mean, um, I'd even before we even talk about the main card or whatever, a card is pretty solid when you're seeing people on the prelims that you're like, oh, that might be a pretty good fight. That's when the card is strong. The early prelims are kind of just okay. I guess the best fighter on the early prelims is Pollyanna Viana. She's fighting Hannah Cyphers. The other ones, oh yeah, Charles Bird is very disappointing to me. He came from Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, but I am very unimpressed with his fight IQ. I'm not, but he does fight a undefeated fighter on the early prelims, Edmund Shabazian. I haven't seen him fight yet. I'll watch him before the card comes around. But when you get to the mid-level prelims, that's when you're like, oh, okay. Diego Sanchez against Mickey Gall,
Hmm.
Cody Smith against Alejandro Perez, Johnny Walker, who we've talked about on this show, against Misha Serkinov. That's a serious challenge for Johnny Walker right there to find out if he's for real as a light heavyweight. And then Jeremy Lil Heaton Stevens against one of the most exciting, well-rounded fighters in any divisions. I beat Magomed Sharapov. That is a sick fight that could be a headline fight on the UFC Fight Night card. And then you go to the main event, the return of Cody Garbrandt against Pedro Munoz, Tisha Torres against Weili Zhang, Robbie Lawler against Ben Askren. We're going to talk about that one in a second. Tyron Woodley against Kamaru Usman. Then the main event is John Jones and Anthony Smith. So the question that I have for you is, does Anthony Smith have a chance to beat John Jones?
No. What next question?
Yeah.
The thing about with that kind of thing is, I mean, in UFC, it's almost a sport where anybody could win on any given night, right? There's so many ways to succeed, and especially once you start getting in, once you go above 185, you can just get caught, right, by anybody. And that having been said, I think when someone is as great as John Jones, and John appears to be locked in and focused, uh, you need to prove to me that he can be beaten. And if I'm going to suspect that he could be beaten, I need it to be from someone that is equally, phenomenal. And no disrespect, but this is not that situation. I don't think Anthony Smith is, you know, has proven that. Now, could he have a great camp? Could he improve and show up with some tactics? Maybe see something that between his body type and because he's a big guy, his skill set that he can have an advantage over John and surprise us? Maybe. That's the nature of the sport. Do I see that? No, I do not see that.
Well, I would agree. I don't see a chance for him to. I mean, like you said, you can always get caught.
It
That
looked like
that's
it hurt you to agree right there. Like I saw a little, like, you know what I'm saying? Did that bother you?
no, no. I have been saying this for the whole week. Like, the UFC can try to sell us this fight, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's a bad fight or anything like that, or it's trash, or they have no business having this fight on. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, it makes sense if you look at the light heavyweight rankings. It's about time for him to
Yeah.
get that shot. He hasn't really beaten anybody though outside of Volkan Oezdemir, which is the fight he won in his last fight. I was actually a little surprised he won. Um, but he really kind of built himself on beating up old, washed up fighters.
Hmm.
Because prior to beating Volkan Oezdemir, he beat Shogun Hua and Rashard Evans, who shouldn't have been fighting.
Right.
And before that, he got knocked out by Thiago Santos, who just knocked out Jan Blankowitz, who is now waiting on the winner of this fight, and he'll probably get the next chance at light heavyweight. Now, that fight did take place when they both were middleweights, but it happened, right? Um, Anthony Smith is a guy who has reinvented himself quite a bit, but Anthony Smith is 34-11, I believe it is. 34 and
Mhm.
11, I think is his record. Um,
That's 11 people not as good as John Jones that he lost
I
to.
mean, and I mean, I'm not gonna say and try to talk like that's just the end all be all. I'm sorry, he's 31-13 is what his record is.
Okay.
I I'm not gonna try to talk like yeah, that's the end all be all because records can be deceiving because guys and girls are at different places in their career, and you'll see people who lost a ton early in their career, and now they're a totally different fighter because if you really look at his career, he's only lost twice in the last 5 years, and he's been very active, right? In that time period, he has an 8-fight win streak,
Mhm.
and this is his second 3-fight win streak, right? But he did lose to Thiago Santos, and he did lose to Cesar Ferreira. So he lost, to El Mutante, who is a good fighter, but not a great fighter. Um, I just Anthony Smith is a big, strong guy, and he's a durable guy. But I don't see anything happening with Anthony Smith except for him getting beat up and punished and dismantled. The biggest problem I think Anthony Smith has with was two big issues I think he has with John Jones. One, he's slow. Anthony
Mhm.
Smith's not a quick, super athletic guy. He's a big guy who you might look at, and before you see him move, you think he's more athletic than he is, but he's pretty slow. Secondly, his stamina isn't fantastic. If you saw him fight Volkan Oezdemir, he was dog tired, but he's strong, he's big, he got an and Volkan Oezdemir's stamina is even worse.
Mhm.
So he was able to get into an advantageous spot later in the fight and choke him out. The other issue with this, and it's not really anything Anthony Smith can do, but John Jones, like you said, does appear to be motivated and locked in and fighting with something to prove. And it's very difficult for me to imagine him being upset when he's in this state.
Yeah, and John's a very scientific fighter when it comes to breaking down his opponents. He's a
Mhm.
film guy, and instinctively he figures stuff out in the ring if you make it in the octagon if you make
Yeah.
adjustments.
Mhm.
So it's when he's locked in, it's really really hard to bet against him. And like you said, he's got a picogram on his shoulder. So
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's for me to imagine him getting upset, not just beat, being upset by a person that he is so much better than.
mhm.
It's just very difficult for me to imagine him that happening to him in this current mind state.
Yeah, and at this age too, because all of the time off that he's had has kept him pretty young.
And
And
fresh.
yes, so John looks physically very, very strong every time we've seen him in the last couple of years. So, nope.
Yeah, I don't think so.